What is up, Hardcore Nation? It's Hardcore Christopher here, and first and foremost, I am so excited because I am an uncle. My nephew was born at 11:04 this morning after a C-section. So, with that in mind, with that out of the way, let's learn about Draco Malfoy. Draco Malfoy grew up as an only child at Malfoy Manor, the magnificent mansion in Wiltshire. The magnificent mansion I already read that. Which had been in his family's possession for many centuries from the time when he could talk. It was made clear to him that he was triply special. Firstly, as a wizard, secondly, as a pureblood, and thirdly, as a member of the Malfoy family. Draco was raised in an atmosphere of regret that the Dark Lord had not succeeded in taking command of the wizarding community, although he was prudently reminded that such sentiments ought not to be expressed outside the small circle of the family and their close friends, or daddy might get into trouble in childhood. Draco associated mainly with the pureblood children of his father's ex-Death Eater cronies, and therefore arrived at Hogwarts with a small group of friends already made, including Theodore Knott and Vincent Crabe. Questions for everything wrestling. Like every other child of Harry Potter's age, Draco heard stories of the boy who lived through his youth. Many different theories had been in circulation for years as to how Harry survived what should have been a lethal attack, and one of the most persistent was that Harry himself was a great dark wizard. That is not true. The fact that he had been removed from the wizarding community seemed to wishful thinkers to support this view, and Draco's father, Willie Lucius Malfoy, was one of those who subscribed most eagerly to the theory. It was comforting to think that he, Lucius, might be in for a second chance of world domination, should this Potter boy prove to be another and greater pureblood champion. It was therefore in the knowledge that he was doing nothing of which his father would disapprove, and in the hope that he might be able to relay some interesting news home, that Draco Malfoy offered Harry Potter his hand when he realized who he was on the Hogwarts Express. Harry's refusal of Draco's friendly overtures, and the fact that he had already formed allegiance that he had to Ron Weasley, whose family is
these are tough times, anxious times, uncertain times.
Anathema to the Malfoys turns Malfoy against him at once. Draco realized correctly that
Changes can be
the
easy to
wild
resist.
hope
Don't be
of
scared.
the ex-Death
Be
Eaters
prepared.
that Harry
Start with this
Potter
Crave
was
report.
another
See if
and
you or
better
if your plan is
Voldemort
changing
are
and how it
completely
compares to
unfounded,
others in your
and
area.
their
More
mutual
benefits,
enmity
better coverage,
is
save money.
assured
Find out
from
what's
that
possible.
point. Much
Free
of
special
Draco's
report.
behavior at
This
school
is the
was
information you
modeled
need
on
to
the
be prepared.
most
Call
impressive
now.
person he knew, his father, and he faithfully copied Lucius's cold and contemptuous manner to everyone outside his inner circle, having recruited a second henchman, Crabe, being already in position pre-Hogwarts on the train to school. The less the less physically imposing Malfoy used Crabe and Goalie as a combination of henchmen and bodyguards throughout his 6 years of school life. Draco's feelings for Harry were always based in a great part on envy. Though he never sought fame, Harry was unquestionably the most talked about and admired person at school, and this naturally jarred with a boy who had been brought up to believe that he occupied an almost royal position within the wizarding community. What was more, Harry was most talented at flying, the one skill at which Malfoy had been confident he would outshine all the other first years. The fact that the positions no, the fact that the potions master, Snape, had a soft spot for Malfoy and despised Harry was only slight compensation. Draco resorted to many different dirty tactics in his perpetual quest to get under Harry's skin, or discredit him in the eyes of others, including but not limited to telling lies about him to the press, manufacturing insulting badges to wear about him, attempting to curse him from behind, and dressing up as one of the Dementors to which Harry had shown himself particularly vulnerable. However, Malfoy had his own moments of humiliation at Harry's hands, notably on the Quidditch pitch, and never forgot the shame of being turned into a bouncing ferret by a Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher. While many people thought that Harry Potter, who had witnessed the Dark Lord's rebirth, was a liar or a fantasist, Draco Malfoy was one of the few who knew that Harry was telling the truth. His own father had felt his dark mark burn and had flown to rejoin the Dark Lord, witnessing Harry and Voldemort's graveyard duel. The discussions of these events at Malfoy Manor gave rise to conflicting sensations in Draco Malfoy. On the one hand, he was thrilled by the secret knowledge that Voldemort had returned, and that what his father had always described as the family's glory days were back once more. On the other, the whispered discussions about the way that Harry, had again evaded the Dark Lord's attempts to kill him, caused Draco further twines of anger and envy. Much as the Death Eaters disliked Harry as an obstacle and as a symbol, he was discussed seriously as an adversary, whereas Draco was still
But it was a friend of mine. Me too.
relegated to the status of schoolboy by Death Eaters who met of his parents' house. Though they were not on opposing sides of the gathering battle, Draco felt envious of Harry's status. He cheered himself up by imagining Voldemort's triumph, seeing his family honored under a new regime, and he himself feted at Hogwarts as the important and impressive son of Voldemort's second in command. School life took an upturn in Draco's 5th year. Although forbidden to discuss at Hogwarts what he had heard at home, Draco took pleasure in petty triumphs. He was a perfect, and Harry was not. And Dolores Umbridge, the new defense against the dark arts teacher, seemed to loathe Harry quite as much as he did. He became a member of Dolores Umbridge's inquisitorial squad, and made it his business to try and discover what Harry and a gang of disparate students were up to, as they formed and trained in secret as the Forbidden Organization, Dumbledore's army. However, at the very moment of triumph, when Draco had cornered Harry and his comrades, and when it seemed that Harry must be expelled by Umbridge, Harry slipped through his fingers. Worse still, Harry managed to thwart Lucius Malfoy's attempt to kill him, and Draco's father was captured and sent to Azkaban prison. Azkaban. Sorry. Draco's world now fell apart from having been as he and his father had believed on the cusp of authority and prestige. Such
Nope. Love you. Love you too. This holiday it's Nerf or nothing.
such as they had never known before. His father was taken from the family home and imprisoned far away in the fearsome wizard prison guarded by Dementors. Lucius had been Draco's role model and hero since birth. Now he and his mother were
He likes it. Say you're looking for the perfect present. You might try looking at the perfect place. A place with gifts that light up a face, as well as a room.
Paras.
Easy to find the friends they'll love.
Among the Death Eaters,
That place isn't a weirdo.
Lucius
That place
was
is a place around the
a
world
failure
with people who know their gifts.
and discredited in the eyes of the furious Lord Voldemort. Draco's existence had been
Decorate the cinnamon rolls and the tree however they want. Pillsbury.
Draco's existence had been clustered
Support your immune system to help you feel more confident. Whether you're heading out here
clustered
or even in here, get ready with the advanced hydration of Pedialyte.
This holiday season, give the gift of comfort.
and protected until this point. He had been a privileged boy with little to trouble him, assured of his status in the world, and with his head full of petty concerns. Now, with his father gone and his mother distraught and afraid, he had to assume a man's responsibility. Worse was to come. Voldemort seeking to punish Lucius Malfoy still further for the botched capture of Harry, demanded that Draco perform a task so difficult that he would almost certainly fail and pay with his life. Draco was to murder Albus Dumbledore. How Voldemort did not trouble to say. Draco was to be left to his own initiative, and Narcissa guessed correctly that her son was being set up to fail by a wizard who was devoid of pity and could not tolerate failure. Furious at the world that seemed suddenly to have turned on his father, Draco accepted full membership of the Death Eaters and agreed to perform the murder Voldemort ordered. At this early stage, full of the desire for revenge and to return his father to Voldemort's favor, Draco barely comprehended what he was being asked to do. All he knew was that Dumbledore represented everything his imprisoned father disliked. Draco managed quite easily to convince himself that he too thought the world would be a better place without the Hogwarts headmaster, around whom
Are so damn predictable. Oh, you think so, do you? Well, if we're so damn predictable, why
around whom opposition to Voldemort had always rallied. Enthralled to the idea of himself as a real Death Eater, Draco set off for Hogwarts with a burning sense of purpose. Gradually, however, as he found that his task was much more difficult than he had anticipated, and after he had come close to accidentally killing 2 other people instead of Dumbledore, Draco's nerve began to fail. With the threat of harm to his family and himself hanging over him, he began to crumble under the pressure. The ideas that Draco had about himself and his place in the world were distinguishing. All his life he had idolized a father who advocated violence and was not afraid to use it himself. And now that his son discovered in himself a distaste for murder, he felt it to be a shameful failing. Even so, he could not free himself from his conditioning. He reportedly refused the assistance of Severus Snape because he was afraid that Snape would attempt to steal his glory. Voldemort and Snape underestimated Draco. He proved an adept at occlumency, the magical art of repelling attempts to read the mind, which was essential for the undercover work he had undertaken. After 2 doomed attempts on Dumbledore's life, Draco succeeded in his ingenious plan to introduce a whole group of Death Eaters into Hogwarts, with the result that Dumbledore was indeed killed, though not by Draco's hand. Even when faced with a weak and wandless Dumbledore, Draco found himself unable to deliver the coup d'etat. Well, the coup de grace. Because in spite of himself, he was touched by Dumbledore's kindness and pity for his would-be killer. Snape subsequently covered for Draco, lying to Voldemort about Draco lowering his wand prior to his own arrival at the top of the astronomy tower. Snape emphasized Draco's skill in introducing the Death Eaters into the school and cornering Dumbledore for him Snape to kill. When Lucius was freed from Azkaban, shortly afterwards, the family was allowed to return to Malfoy Manor with their lives. However, they were now completely discredited from dreams of the highest status under Voldemort's new regime. The Malfoys found themselves the lowest in the ranks of the Death Eaters, weaklings and failures to whom Voldemort was henceforth.
They had some Americans helping them. 1 minute I'm riding my horse, and next thing you know, we're taking sniper fire. And some bitch blows my leg off.
Derivative
You and your team
and
should have been there. You sure
contemptuous.
as hell shouldn't have been interfering with our
Draco's
for the other guys.
changed yet still conflicted personality
Personal.
revealed itself in his actions during the remainder of the war between Voldemort and those who were trying to stop him.
Concern you. We tried to warn you a bunch of times.
Although Draco had still not rid himself of the hope of returning the family to their former high position, his in
I am sorry that I shot you in the leg. I am so sorry.
Don't worry,
in
Special K.
conf
I'm not gonna kill you.
fin
But I am going to
in conventionally awkward
Man, come on, man. No.
Consensus led him to try half-heartedly perhaps, but arguably as the best he could in the circumstances, to save Harry from Voldemort
It looks that way.
when the former was captured and dragged
He's still alive. I got a cell phone. I need you to get everything you can off it.
The former was captured and dragged to Malfoy Manor during the final battle at Hogwarts. However, Malfoy made yet another attempt to capture Harry and thereby save his parents' prestige and possibly their lives. Whether he could have brought himself to actually hand over Harry is a moot point. I suspect that, as with his attempted murder of Dumbledore, he would again have found the reality of bringing about another person's death much more difficult in practice than in theory. Draco survived Voldemort's siege of Hogwarts because Harry and Ron saved his life. Following the battle, his father evaded prison by providing evidence against fellow Death Eaters, helping to ensure the capture of many of Lord Voldemort's followers who had fled into hiding. The events of Draco's late teens forever changed his life. He had had the beliefs with which he had grown up challenged in the most frightening way. He had experienced terror and despair, seen his parents suffer for their allegiance, and had witnessed the crumbling of all that his family had believed in. People whom Draco had been raised or else had learned to hate, such as Dumbledore had offered him help and kindness, and Harry Potter had given him his life. After the events of the Second Wizarding War, Lucius found his son as affectionate as ever, but refusing to follow the same old pure bloodline Draco married the younger sister of a fellow Slytherin, Astera Greengrass, who had gone through a similar, though less violent and frightening, conversion from pure blood ideals to a more tolerant life view was felt by Narcissa and Lucius to be something of a disappointment as a daughter-in-law. They had high hopes of a girl whose family featured on the Sacred 28, but as Astora refused to raise their grandson Scorpius in the belief that Muggles were scum, family gatherings were often fraught with tension. Okay. Well, I didn't know Draco Malfoy's backstory was gonna be so spoiled. But I hope you all enjoyed. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell. And as always, I'll see you. And as always, I'm Hardcore Christopher. Keep it hardcore, everyone.